We'll suspend that conversation for the moment and talk about some state politics with Representative Gino Bulso. He is representing Williamson County and doing a really good job at it, and he has a new piece of legislation that I believe has been tabled that we wanted to discuss with him. Representative Bulso, thanks for coming on with us. It's always good to chat. How are you, sir?
Doing fine, Matt. I hope you are as well.
I am. How's the General Assembly, generally speaking, going thus far for you?
Very smoothly. You know, we've opened the second year of our 113th General Assembly session earlier this month, and we're already moving bills through committee and doing a lot of good work for the people of Tennessee.
There are some that would suggest that House Bill 1605 is a quote-unquote controversial bill. That's the first thing I read about it on the Tennessean website. I don't know that I consider it too controversial, considering my stand on displays, public displays of things like flags has always been fairly consistent, that I want prominently displayed the political sovereignty of the United States of America, the political sovereignty of the state of Tennessee, and everything else needs to kind of be subservient to those two symbols. Before we get into some of the particulars, just describe the impetus behind 1605, and for those who don't know what it does, explain it to us.
Sure. We have a law on the books right now, Matt, that requires all schools to fly the U.S. flag. And what we're doing with 1605 is expanding that section to list specifically other flags that schools are permitted to fly at their discretion, and further providing that they are not at liberty to post flags that represent a particular political viewpoint. And the background for it is that some parents in my county became upset that you had many classrooms where teachers and counselors were displaying the pride flag and attempting to use that flag as a way of influencing values that the parents were using to raise their children. And the essence of the bill is that parents should be allowed to decide what values their children are exposed to, not those who are sitting in a classroom in an academic setting that children go to by law in order to learn. And so the nature of the bill is one that returns to parents the right to raise their children with the values they want, and to require that schools stick to what they do best, which is educating the child.
Are you finding this quite a bit in Tennessee schools? Are you seeing a lot of this? What level of conversation have you had with our school teachers and school administrators that would lead you to make sure that you want to kind of clarify what teachers are permitted to do versus what is impermissible?
Well, in fact, once we filed the bill earlier this month, Matt, I began hearing from parents all over the state. I don't know that it's in all 95 counties necessarily, but certainly from Memphis to Mountain City, as they say. Apparently, the presence of the pride flag in classrooms is just exceedingly increasing as time goes on. And more parents are becoming concerned about the use of that flag as a way of trying to indoctrinate their children with a set of values that they don't share. And yes, it's something that I have discussed with teachers, with school board members in Williamson County and in many of our other counties across the state.
You had a committee hearing about it yesterday. Tell me how that went.
It went very well. You know, we went ahead and began discussion on the bill. We had some residents of Tennessee testify about the bill. Ultimately, after a fairly rigorous discussion, we had a request that there be an amendment made to the bill, a procedural amendment. And so we didn't actually take the vote in the Education K through 12 subcommittee. We're going to delay the vote until next week so that we can add this procedural language to the bill that one of the members has requested.
What is this the concept of display and defining display, or is that something different?
That's something a little bit different.
Okay.
There was a concern that we want to give school boards the opportunity to comply with the statute before a parent or some authorized person had to file a legal action to have the school comply with the statute. And so the revision is going to be that a parent or other interested person who alleges that the act is being violated because some impermissible flag is being displayed has to give 10 days written notice to the school to allow it to act to remedy the noncompliance with the statute before any type of legal action is required.
And just walk us through, for those who, and I don't think I'm confused, Gino, but for those that perhaps are confused why this is an issue, I fully understand how any display of the pride flag has been completely politicized at this point. And you're seeing a lot of it in our elementary schools, and a lot of parents talk to me, and I'm certain they talk to you about their concern that their fourth grader has to deal with politically charged elements within the classroom that they should not need to deal with, and that the parents feel like they should have the opportunity to instruct along those levels as opposed to public education. And I know that you've had these conversations, and I just want you the opportunity to speak to the broader audience about why this has become an issue that is worthy of concern to the point that you have filed 1605.
It has become a concern simply because there are so many parents, both in my county and across the state, that have objected to their local principals, local superintendents, local school board members who have not in any way responded to their concerns, because ideally you would never need the state government to become involved in something like this that is primarily a local issue. I mean, why is it that local school boards should not be able to decide, what type of flags are flown in their individual counties? Ideally, they would do that, but unfortunately, for reasons of political correctness or wokeness or otherwise, the local officials are simply not responding to the parents' concerns. They are rejecting them. They're effectively saying, well, our hands are tied. We have no control over what our teachers and counselors put on their desk or what type of values they attempt to use to influence their students. And so parents have come to us as the General Assembly and as their elected representatives for help. And 1605 is our way of helping, because the bill itself doesn't specify anything about a pride flag or any other specific political flag. It simply lists those that represent the values of all Tennesseans and says you simply cannot use the classroom as a place to display a flag that represents a political viewpoint, because that has no place in an elementary school or obviously in a middle school or secondary school for that matter.
Well, and that leads me to ask you this. Are you defining what is or what constitutes a display or not? Because I do know that there will be many that attempt to exploit whatever loophole they can find within the law. And I would think that word would have a pretty hefty amount of weight within the legislation as to how it's applied in the classroom. What is a display? What constitutes a display in your mind?
In my mind, the word display is already in the statute, and the way that our law works is that courts are required to interpret a word like display in accordance with what's called its plain and ordinary meaning. And so to display something is to exhibit it, to put it in a place for other people to see. That's what display means. And because you are 100% correct, Matt, that there are going to be all types of contrivances that folks come up with as a way of getting around the statute, I think it likely that before the bill gets all the way to the floor of the House and to the floor of the Senate, that we will draft and insert into the statute a specific definition for what the word display means in this context, so that no one can start playing games with what display means, like, trying to, take a picture of a flag and posting it on a bulletin board or on a door or something of that nature. We're going to tighten it up so that we, I hope, can avoid that type of contrivance to get around the statute.
I mean, obviously, the usual suspects are going to come out of the woodwork and accuse you, Gino, of being anti-gay or, somehow anti-transgender by extension. They're going to accuse you of trying to infuse Christian values within the classroom. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to some of those criticisms that I'm sure you've already seen.
No, I appreciate that, Matt. Yeah, we hear them. We heard them yesterday, and we'll be hearing them again next week. And obviously, I think we're called to love all people. We look at people as individuals. We don't define them by sexual preference or by what's nowadays called gender identity. I mean, we love all of them, Matt. But the issue is, what values should children be taught in a classroom? And that is really why I think you're seeing so much pushback, because there are so many that support that pride flag agenda that want to try to take all children and convince them that what they're saying is true, that you can become a boy if you want to, if you're really a girl. And that simply denies the truth of the body. It denies the truth of sexuality. And parents just rightfully have refused to put up with it. So we here in the General Assembly are going to do what we're called to do, which is to enact legislation that furthers the viewpoints of the more than 5 million Tennesseans across the state who put all of us in the Republican caucus here in the General Assembly.
Well, I mean, I think the reaction amongst some of those who have concerns about the legislation would be quite different if we were talking about a different type of material, a different type of flag, something that symbolizes. An easy example would be if a Christian teacher put a large cross on the wall within their school. Now, I think most Tennesseans would identify through the Christian faith and go to church and whatnot. But there would be some that would rightly step forward and say, "Hey, wait a minute, we're of the Jewish faith, or we don't worship the Christian faith in our household. We want to be. We don't think that that's appropriate for the school system." And while I don't see the harm in it, I can understand the argument there. Similarly, I understand the argument that you're making with regard to 1605.
Exactly. And I think the U.S. Supreme Court crossed that bridge back in the 1960s when it removed prayer from schools under the basis that it violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And, because you cannot express religious views if you're a teacher or a counselor to students, obviously, neither should you be able to express other views from other religious or political viewpoints. And really, this legislation is completely neutral with regard to the content of any political statement. It simply says the classroom is not the place for this, especially in our elementary classrooms, where obviously children are the most impressionable and the least able to really combat this type of influence, because they simply have not lived long enough to develop those skills of critical thinking that are essential to being able to make your way in the world.
Does the legislation say anything about, and I understand that there might be some amendments made with regard to display or whatnot. Several of my listeners, Gino, are asking about, teachers wearing things on their persons. I mean, you're not getting into any of that territory, right? Like flag lapel pins, for example, is the one that was brought up to me.
I would say that if you had a teacher that was wearing a pride flag as a lapel, that yes, that would violate the intent of the statute. Mm-hmm. Because recall that the intent of it is to remove
the politicalization. Yes.
Exactly. And that's one of the areas where we're limited by the English language to a certain extent and how comprehensive the bill could be. And that's likely to happen once this bill is passed, and I do think it will pass. We're going to see others come up with different ways of trying to get around it, like they'll move from a flag to just a sign that maybe says in words or in substance the value that they want to communicate. And then we'll just have to deal with that as it happens. But right now, we have a prolific use of political flags in our classrooms. Parents are complaining about it across the state. Nothing is being done at the local level, and so we at the state level are going to act to address that problem. When new problems come up, if they are failed to address locally, we're going to be available to our constituents to act on their behalf.
Gino, you've got our support. I appreciate you coming on and explaining it for us, as you're always so eloquent when you do come on the radio show, and we appreciate your representation of Williamson County and of the state of Tennessee. Thank you so much.
Best of luck to you, Matt. Thank you. Bye-bye.